I want to tell you about a pilot who almost quit, and not because the flying was too hard, and not because the physical demands were beyond him. He almost quit because the program I wrote for him was technically perfect and completely wrong for his life. And the moment I figured out why is the moment I understood something about performance that I hadn't fully grasped in 15 years of coaching elite athletes. In this video, I'm going to take you inside a fighter pilot selection program and show you 3 things I learned there that changed how I coach every athlete and client I've worked with since. When I left Ireland after Munster Rugby, I was done. That's not an exaggeration. I genuinely believed I was finished with strength and conditioning. The hardest professional period of my career had ended with me feeling like the 2 things I had always relied on, my ability to connect with people and my technical knowledge, had both failed me at the same time in the same environment for about 2.5 years. So when my wife and I moved back to the States right in the middle of COVID, I wasn't looking for the next big role. I was looking for something that would let me exist without carrying anything heavy. I saw a listing for a strength and conditioning position near where we lived, which was close to Luke Air Force Base. The role was lead strength coach for something called the B course, a selection program for incoming fighter pilots, so student pilots going through the process of earning their wings. I took it for the wrong reasons, at least professionally. I took it because it was low responsibility by design, so no management, no politics, no 60-person roster to manage across competition schedules, just the craft. Show up, coach, and go home. I didn't know it was going to become one of the most clarifying experiences of my career. The B course runs on a tight cycle, so new groups of candidates rotating through every 8 weeks. Different people, different backgrounds, wildly different fitness levels, but all of them operating inside the same high-pressure environment. Fighter pilots don't train to be fit, they train to be ready. And that distinction sounds simple, but it's not. Being fit means you can perform under controlled conditions, and being ready means you can perform when the conditions aren't controlled. So when fatigue is high, when cognitive load is maxed, and when the margin for error is genuinely 0. The stress architecture these pilots operate under is unlike anything in conventional sport. And when I think of stress, I've got 4 layers. You have structural stress, so the physical demands of flying, of G-force tolerance, and of the physical selection process itself. You have processing stress, the cognitive load of learning complex systems, of running through emergency procedures, of making decisions in real time in a simulated environment that is trying to fail you. You have output stress, so the total amount of output they're giving to everything every day. And then you have pressure stress, so the psychological layer. Every session, every simulation, every flight is a data point that could either end their career, or they have to think about the weight of actually getting the job and what that means. So the stakes are not hypothetical. All 4 layers are running simultaneously every day. I'd spent years teaching coaches about stress architecture as a framework for understanding athletes, and here it was in front of me with the volume turned all the way up. The S&C program was a mandatory 8 weeks, with the last 4 weeks being optional, and one of the pilots I was close to during the mandatory period just stopped coming into the gym. I pulled him aside and I asked him directly what was going on. When I design programs, I design them to be as individualized as possible, so I use percentages mapped to that person's 1RM. I'll use velocities depending upon the strength quality I want to develop. I'll select specific exercises for that person based on their abilities and movement quality, and I'll be present and coach that quality, speed, and focus during the session. When I asked him why he wasn't showing up, what he told me stopped me in my tracks. He said the training program that I had written wasn't making things better, it was making it worse. Not because it was too hard, because it was adding stress to a system that was already at capacity. The percentages and velocities, exact numbers he had to hit, were dipping into his pressure stress, the psychological need to perform. My coaching cues were dipping into his processing stress, so he was trying to figure out how to perform the movement the way I was asking him to. Every session felt like another thing he had to survive rather than something that was helping him survive everything else. I went back and I looked at what I had written for him. It was technically excellent. The programming was sound, the loading parameters were appropriate for his training age, the exercise selection was logical and well sequenced. And it was completely wrong because I had written it for an athlete in a controlled environment focused on only one stress layer and ignoring everything else. He wasn't an athlete that just needed to be more structurally sound. He was a person with 4 stress layers running simultaneously who needed his training to work with his life, not add another demand on top. I removed the intensity prescriptions. I gave him volume ranges instead of fixed targets to hit. And I took the performance pressure out of the weight room because the performance pressure everywhere else in his life was already maxed. I made the weight room the place it was supposed to be, a place where he could recover where he needed to and improve where he needed to, and he came back. not just to the sessions, but to himself. The training became something that helped him manage the load rather than add to it. And I remember thinking, this is what individualization actually means. Not choosing the right exercises and selecting optimal loading parameters, but designing for the life of the person that is actually living it. I want to give you 3 things that I took from that environment that I apply everywhere now. Lesson 1, elite performance isn't about doing more, it's about being ready at the right moment. Fighter pilots don't train to exhaustion. They train to readiness, and there's a version of performance culture in sport and in coaching that equates volume with commitment, intensity with seriousness, and more with better. That pilot wasn't failing because he wasn't working hard enough. He was failing because nobody had assessed the full load picture before adding to it, especially me. The question I should have asked on day 1 wasn't, what program does this person need? It should have been, what is this person's system already carrying? And what element of training does this person need to improve themselves inside that reality? That question changes everything about how you design. It changes what you prescribe, how much and when. And it applies to every athlete and client you work with, not just fighter pilots. Your athlete with a demanding job, 2 kids, and a competition in 6 weeks is operating a version of that same stress architecture. The stakes are different, but the mechanism is identical. Lesson 2, the stress architecture a fighter pilot operates under is the same architecture your athletes live inside, just with higher stakes. The 4 layers, structural, processing, output, and pressure, don't belong to elite military environments. They belong to every human being trying to perform in a life that doesn't stop for training. The mid-30s recreational athlete who trains 3 times a week has all 4 layers running. The coach, managing a full roster while building a business, has all 4 layers running. And the young coach trying to prove themselves in their first professional role has all 4 layers running. What changes between a fighter pilot and an amateur runner is the magnitude of each layer and the consequences of getting it wrong. What doesn't change is the mechanism. Stress stacks, recovery is required, and a system that ignores the full picture will eventually fail the person inside it. The reason I teach stress architecture to coaches isn't because I have a clever framework. It's because I've seen what happens when you ignore it in one of the highest stakes performance environments that I've ever been in. The pilot who almost quit didn't have a fitness problem. He had a load management problem. And I almost missed it because I was looking at the training variables instead of the full picture. Lesson 3, a system that only works under ideal conditions is a framework. A real system works under pressure. This is the one that I keep coming back to. I spent a career watching coaches, myself included, build elegant approaches to training that function perfectly when everything is in order. When athletes show up recovered, motivated, and with full availability, when the schedule cooperates, and when the variables behave. But real performance doesn't happen in those conditions. Real performance happens when the schedule is broken and when the pilot is on his 3rd consecutive day of high cognitive load and when the athlete slept badly and the competition is still in 4 weeks. A framework gives you something to think with when things are going well. A system gives you something to execute when things aren't. The difference I saw in that environment, the difference between the candidates who made it through and the ones who didn't, wasn't always physical capacity. It was often the ability to execute under load, to have something reliable to fall back on when the situation was trying to take everything else away. That's what I want for every coach that I work with. Not a better framework for understanding their athletes, but a better system that they can trust when the session isn't going to plan, and the clients walk in carrying more than they were carrying last week, and when the answer isn't obvious. Because that's when the coaching actually happens. Not in the planning, in the pressure. I took that job at Luke Air Force Base because I needed a break from everything that coaching had cost me. What I didn't expect was that it would give me the clearest view I've ever had of what coaching is actually for. It's not for the controlled sessions. It's not for the athletes who arrive ready and leave improved. It's for the moments when someone is carrying more than they should have to carry, and the system you've built either helps them or adds to that weight. That pilot figured it out. He finished the B course and he got his wings. And I went back to the industry I thought I was done with a much clearer sense of what I was there to build. If this kind of thinking resonates, if you want to go deeper into how stress architecture actually changes the way you program and coach, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next video.